Okay, so today we've been asked to do Ranger on Hero 6. So I've been thinking about what build to kind of run on Ranger today. The problem is I've done kind of the main Ranger builds on my channel already. I don't like rehashing the same content too much. So I think this time what I'm going to try and do is a little bit of an offshoot of the Javelin cooldown build. And we're going to go for a clone cooldown build. So we'll see how that works out today. None of these really anything that we want here, so we'll just grab Javelin off the bat. So yeah, weapons that we get aren't too specific for this run. I don't really care much as long as it's usable. We will be using the Javelin for a large part of our damage, but that's kind of how you play Ranger. Using stealth to avoid damage. And this is a build that I've toyed with for a no damage taken run. It's not one that I've completely gone through and made sure it's tip top perfect, but that's because you don't ever want to try and overdevelop build too much, because you're not always going to get the same perks. So we'll see if we can get our main one here. We're going to want Supreme Critical, we're going to want probably Simple Geometry, and to be honest we're probably going to want Night Shroud as well. As with most Ranger builds, I'm going to grab Supreme Critical first. Grab a Plunger because we're going to be doing a lot of random crits. And to be honest, I use Supreme Critical in like, I don't know, 90% of my Ranger builds because it's just such a strong perk. Concentrate a minute while I kill that. But yeah, the increased crit damage that you can get with Ranger combining with auto crit is just so strong and so good for pretty much any of the Ranger builds that you're going to do. Like, you want it for high crit damage builds, you want it for the cooldown builds, because if you get French fries then it's just even more cooldown, and crits are just damage, so yeah, it just kind of works in all of his builds. So it's a very solid first pick, because you're not wasting rerolls. But we are going to want to try and get the clones on the next perk, which we will be getting as soon as we get to the orange room. Yeah, the Ranger has such high and consistent damage, and it's kind of safe damage as well. We'll grab Toaster here. We're probably going to get Elemental Explosion later on, so with Toaster, if we don't end up with the fire weapon, we'll be doing bonus damage, so that's always nice. Hawkeye's fine here. Just an overall buff to his passive and potential damage. Gonna stealth into here to try and make it a little bit safer to get down, because coming in from that angle with lots of damage flying at you is a surefire way to take damage. I often enter this section like that because 9 times out of 10 that's where the rail bot will spawn from, if one spawns. That just means we're in the correct position to kill it quickly. going to jump over all of those and then we'll kill them on the way back out. Right, there we go. We've got the decoy. I'm going to grab the cells because I'm going to want to grab both the paintbrush and the claws if I could. There we go. Okay, cleared this area already. Oh, we just took our first hit. Not bad. Haven't really been trying to avoid hits, but this build just kind of naturally doesn't take much damage. Oh, I thought I had my drone, not my drones, my decoys. That's the word I was looking for. It's surprisingly difficult to be able to speak anything coherent while playing Hero 6, even though it's not necessarily the hardest thing in the world. It's does take some concentration. I'm just going to keep going around. I'm not really too fussed about killing the Goliath too quickly. Bounce across that room. Drop a decoy. Skip an advert. And this will probably be a slow fight, but shouldn't be too difficult. If you wanted to maximise DPS there, you probably should have thrown 2 javelins first and then got the clones out, because you get your javelins back, but there we go. Okay, we should be able to do this before it just miss both of those. Before it goes out into that mode. On to Aqua. We're going to grab Pyro Mirage, because if you've watched my channel at all, you'll know that Burn tends to be my preference for elemental picks, because it's just increased DPS for the most part. And you can just see how much the decoys do. So much damage. Oh. Got stuck there, so took another damage, but that should be okay. If you're ever struggling with Aqua, going up high is a really safe way of dealing with most of the rooms. Oh, thought I had my decoys. Decoy and avoid the elite. Oh, we got double elite. Headbonk should have stunned him then, but it didn't for some reason. I can only assume I'd already done it recently. The paintbrush makes your javelins so good even if you're not running a javelin build, so it's pretty nice. Just double rocket jump over that, nice and easy. May as well pick up a winter hat. I'm using an ice cannon, and it's a very good ice cannon actually, so we're probably just going to use this for most of the run. Might be good to pick up a better boss fighting weapon, but for the most part our decoys and our javelins will deal with bosses just fine for us. So on our next level I'm hoping to pick up some kind of perk that will lead to cooldown reduction. So either Night Shroud or the Elemental Explosion. Let's see what we get. Elemental Surprise, perfect. Again, gonna grab the Pyro version. We don't really need the extra stun, and we like the extra damage. Probably didn't need to throw both of those because I think one will kill them with the burn. Yeah. We'll just drop down our decoys. The next perk upgrade, we're going to want to get the upgrade that will decrease cooldown of our main ability. So then we can start spamming these clones with decoys or sentinels or whatever you hear me call them. Actually called decoys, but if I'm not mistaken, they used to be called sentinels, which is why I always call them sentinel. But I might be completely wrong about that, but I'm sure that's what the perk used to be called. That's probably a waste of that. If I can get into the next... No, I can't. I wanted to try and get into the next area so that I could have my decoys doing some damage in here as well. We've hit S, so we're not going to hang around. The thing about the Ranger is he does so much kind of raw damage and he's got so much utility. Well, I'm not even sure I'd call it utility, so much defense with being able to be invisible and having iframes, and so much offense from his javelins that he's not really that particularly rivaled or anything like that from any of the other robots. Yeah, we've got damage. So yeah, it's rare that a ranger will kind of struggle with any kind of difficulty, because he just does so much and he's so safe. We're going to reduce stealth cooldown because we don't quite have enough yet, and we're not going to be stacking 3 perks that give cooldown in this build like we do on some of the other ability cooldown builds. So any extra we can get should be good. Unfortunately took a bunch of damage from that elite just now because he was a buffed elite, and those are vicious to deal with. Javelin and rail riding to do that rail bot nice and quick. You get all the health instantly if you ride into them, so you don't really have to fumble around. Got buffed elite again, but went down in 2 javelins because it just does so much damage. Like, we're not even particularly specced in javelins right now, and we're doing so much damage with them. Obviously you've got paintbrush, which I believe is now doing 70% of the damage as burn damage. Which, again, this is memory, so it might be wrong. I believe it's more burn damage than if you spec from elemental surprise perk. You choose to make your javelin elemental damage from that. I think that's 30%, whereas the paintbrush is 70, so it provides more. Oddly enough, that's how it works. Good old buff bots making those machine gunners terrifying. Buff bots are a very scary addition to Energy Center. Something else that's worth noting as well when it comes to this kind of build with the decoys, specifically on energy sensor, is the decoys target, they've kind of got an old smart targeting system, so they'll target an enemy unless it's got a shield bot on top of it, then it'll shoot the shield bot. Unfortunately, buff bots are programmed with the same AI as shield bots. So if you've got an enemy that is buffed, then the decoys are going to shoot the buff bot which has a shield on it when it's buffing someone. So they will waste all of their DPS trying to kill a buff. So it's really important in these areas to make sure you're killing, not just because they're buffed enemies so they're more scary, but because you're literally losing DPS by that mechanic being a thing. So it makes target priority even more important. The door has opened here when there's 3 enemies left. That is the most enemies I've ever seen left. I've seen like 1 or 2 before, but having 3 is pretty incredible. I didn't talk about it because I was talking about other stuff at the time. The upgrade that we just took now gives you a 30% cooldown reduction onto your main ability whenever you use it and you've got a full passive bar. And now rather than the like 12 seconds we had before, after we use our ult we go down to 8 seconds. And the drones themselves last about 6, not the drones, sorry, the decoys themselves last about 6 seconds. So you can see how good it can be to have them lasting for an extended, well, you have 2 seconds downtime, that's what I'm trying to say, in a very bad way. Important thing to notice if you're using your main ability to reset your javelins like I'm doing here, if you throw 2 javelins and then instantly use your primary ability, sometimes you'll actually find that you're not getting all your javelins back, and that's because you're using the primary ability while the javelin's still in the air, and it can only recall it once your javelin has landed on a surface. So sometimes you'll lose DPS doing it that way if you're not careful, if you do it too quick. Which I can show you here. We get it back. Once cooldown's off. It's still in flight, and we all used our ability and we didn't get the javelin back. And that's because it hadn't landed yet, so it couldn't be recalled. I just realised I got an anti-boss weapon and then didn't use it at all because I was talking too much about the mechanics. So we'll have to make sure we actually utilise our gear properly next time. Not that it mattered too much because we were still able to kill it fairly quickly with javelins and decoys. This build is one of those builds where it will work no matter what weapons you get. You do not have to rely on weapon drops whatsoever with this. It just relies on having the right perks. So yeah, it's a fairly good kind of self-sustained build. Chasing my tail on where I want to go because I don't want to come this direction. An upgraded ice cannon, but it's actually got 2 blue affixes that I'm not a big fan of, so I'm not going to bother, and we are going to get Bonsai Tree, and we are going to pick our last perk. So simple geometry would be pretty good here because we've got decoys that are having buffed auto crit from both Bonsai Tree and Supreme Critical, so that means that they will benefit from this combo as well. So now the decoys have a little bit of room clear on top of what they already had. But unfortunately, they're targeting shielded things, so they pretty much didn't do anything. Because again, the AI of what gets targeted hasn't been changed since the addition of the buff bots in energy and these small shield bots here. So the decoys don't really have a smart enough AI to target the correct things at the moment. Don't know if it's something that's going to be addressed or if it's something that's kind of semi-intentional. Because the decoys are pretty broken about it, because they're the same decoys that Recon has as well. And I know I hate on the engineer drones and such, so it might seem weird that I hate on those, but big up the decoys. But the damage that they do is actually fairly comparable, and if you've got a little bit of awareness, you can actually get decoys to be a lot more consistent than you can get the drones. And they I think I might be wrong in this now, but from my last test that I did, they do more DPS with less investment than engineer drones do. So you basically have to pour in a whole 2 or 3 perks to make drones equal the same power that you can do in, I guess, 1 perk and 2 upgrades. You don't even need both upgrades really for the decoys, just the elemental upgrade will do. And obviously I've taken pyro because of the damage bonuses you can get, but it's actually really effective to take shock as well. Obviously it just then enables you to have a bit of CC from your decoy, so it depends what you value more, if you value DPS or if you value a bit of safety. I'd probably recommend, if you're not as experienced, then the CC is pretty decent. But if you find that you don't take much damage, or you find bosses pretty easy either way, then unless you're doing a specific build, burn is probably better. And the thing about burn is, as you can see with this build as well, I've got toaster, so having decoys popping burn on everything. Popping isn't a proper word in this sentence, so I don't know why I said that. Procking burn on things is then giving my guns 35%. Is it 35? I think it's 35% damage buff, which is huge. Let's see, is it 35? Yeah. Increase non-burn damage by 35% against burning targets. Okay, so we've got French fries, so our decoys can now also, and we triggered the chocolate. So our decoys now reduce their own cooldown with crits as well. So we should see a fairly high uptime of them. Bearing in mind that I've got toaster, I've just swapped my laser saw out so that it's no longer doing burn, because it will actually be doing more damage not doing burn than it will be doing burn, because it's 30% of the damage dealt goes into the burn damage, whereas toaster's giving 35% damage bonus, so it's 5% difference. And it means I can have a different affix which benefits more. So I've got lucky on it, so now my auto crit chance on that will be ridiculously high. What is it? We've got 30% from Supreme Critical, 20% from Bonsai Tree, and then 20% from Lucky. So yeah, it's on like 70% crit chance. That's interesting, the decoy shot didn't seem to ricochet just then. Have I got that info wrong? No, that's definitely ricochet. Cool. Was worried I was giving wrong information then, but you can see how quick abilities coming back at this point. I could have used it 3 times in that room. And that was mostly just from my decoy shooting. So if you can get French fries early enough, like you can literally clear rooms just with decoy with this build. And you'll be able to do it every single area. Like even there's a Goliath in here, there's an elite in here, and it just doesn't matter. Like, I barely shot a single shot there. And we've got it again. Putting the decoys nice and high means that they have a good range of fire. The elite's causing a tiny bit of issue, but that's only because it's a shielded elite. Otherwise it wouldn't have caused any issue whatsoever. So with most of my builds, I think I've talked about it on other videos, so if you've watched them you probably already know this, but I'll say it again anyway. I tend to pick 3 perks that I want in a build. It doesn't matter too much if I don't get them. I'll have a primary perk that I want, in this case it was the decoy. Then I'll have like a secondary one which is important to make it work, in this case it was the Supreme Critical. And then everything else was secondary, but I kind of knew the other variants that I would want. So the third option would be something that provides cooldown, so that would either be the explosive javelins, it would be the what's it called, knight something or other. I struggle with names at the best of times, let alone when I'm trying to kill stuff at the same time. But that basically has an upgrade that lets you get cooldowns every time you hit something with your javelin, or preference of the elemental one that I did end up picking up because it's less situational. I didn't mean to jump out that area straight away, but nothing that I could have got from there would have been that major. And then the last perk, it really doesn't matter what I had there, anything else is just a damage bonus. So it's just, yeah, it doesn't matter at all. There were a few perks that you could have picked that would potentially work better depending on if you were wanting more single target or more mob clearing. And you'll see here that I will have my ability up almost non-stop in this fight unless I take damage. But the ability also allows me to be not having the aggro of the boss and also have iframes when I trigger it, so I can use it to avoid damage as well. So a very strong build. A slight variation on my other cooldown builds which revolve around javelin, this revolved around decoys, but still very strong, still very viable, and I hope you enjoyed. Peace.